there's a lot of things that you shouldn't be in life, a lot of the negative things, and one of them are PlayStation fanboys. I'm sorry, but whenever there's something that crosses my entire computer screen, it's never anything about an Xbox fanboy because they kind of relatively stay in their lane. But when it comes to PlayStation fanboys or maybe Nintoddlers, there's something that must be said, specifically in this case that we're going to talk about today.
I'm getting just a little bit frustrated right now, so let's just have a nice therapeutic angry rant for the middle of the night.
But why in the middle of the night? I mean, you could have just did this at a regular time of the day like you do most of your videos, from what I can tell. But instead, we have to lose sleep over a plastic box.
What's up, gamers? Dreamcast Guy here, and yes, these are my real pajamas. I wear a Goku gi in my sleep. But let's turn on the spotlight and talk about this ridiculousness that keeps cycling across the internet.
It's really not ridiculousness, it's really just a guy making his own opinion based on what he found in initial testing. This isn't anything that should be taken to any kind of credibility whatsoever, but if I were the one watching the video, I would have thought the same thing. And if you're out of the loop, don't worry, Dreamcast Guy will fill us in.
I've seen so much debate recently about this new PlayStation 5 revision. Basically, Sony is trying to make a slightly updated change to the PlayStation 5, another version to basically churn out to make sure the PlayStation 5 has systems on store shelves. Well, this guy, Austin Evans, he is a very, very big YouTuber, and he's had this trending video for the last 2 days called The New PS5 is Worse.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint Dreamcast Guy, but Austin Evans is right. The new PS5 is actually worse than the old PS5, and it's because of the internals. And I'm sure we'll get to those points here really soon, but I just want you to know that you're getting dogpiled for a reason, and I don't think it's because of how intelligent you are.
Now, Austin Evans is a very intelligent gentleman. He decided to do a detailed analysis, breaking them down, running some games, seeing the new PlayStation 5 that's just been produced versus the old PlayStation 5. Now, what I find most fascinating is the fact that he decided to do a complete teardown of it as well, opening it up, and he discovered something is significantly different in this new PlayStation 5, which is this. The PlayStation 5 weighs a ½ pound less because it has a smaller heatsink.
And if you are a proud PlayStation 5 owner, you know how massive that console is. It's almost as big as my computers, and that thing cranks out a lot of heat. And so when you take away something that is essentially making the heat go out, I mean, it's doing an okay job at it, but when you reduce that and you make it smaller with lesser components, then you're going to ruin your entire system. That's how it goes. I'm sorry, there's nothing really else I can add here.
Now, here is an exact side-by-side comparison. This is what is going on, and I cannot believe the amount of people that are freaking out about this. But let's talk about why these people seem to be upset, what seems to be the fear of what's going on, and why this is happening.
Oh boy, let me grab my popcorn so we can hear some damage control.
So what you're looking at here is the heatsink. This is the original PlayStation 5 that's being currently sold in most places, and this is the revised PlayStation 5, the update that's currently being produced, and it seems like we're going to start seeing this version exclusively showing up on store shelves. Now, as you can see, this thing is the heatsink. This is how the heat is taken out of the system and shot out the back. It basically makes sure that nothing just gets too toasty inside the system itself.
Well, at least Dreamcast Guy got the basics. Let's see him expand on it.
Now, let's be clear, this exists for a singular reason. It's because they want to try and just make as many PlayStations as possible. By actually going into the system itself and just shrinking down specific parts, swapping things out, what they're actually going to do is they're making it so they can produce a lot more PlayStation 5s.
And Sony has every right to do that. If they want to make consoles, that's great. Austin Evans' entire point of his video was to say, well, we have this PlayStation 5 that's a new version, and they kind of messed around with some things on the internals, and that makes it run a little bit hotter, and it also uses much more energy. And that may not mean anything to the average gamer trademark, but it does mean a lot of things for the longevity of your console. So instead of it lasting 10 years like the old one might, then this one will probably last somewhere around the realm of 7.
This shortage, let's face it, the PlayStation 5 shortage, it completely sucks for everybody involved.
Well, definitely not the scalpers. I mean, they're making a pretty penny.
I have a pretty big friend group, and nobody I know in real life, not a single person, owns a PlayStation 5. I am the only PlayStation 5 in my entire friend group, and it's simply because I got lucky and happened to pre-order one last year. This system is way too stupid difficult to track down, and Sony themselves knows this. I'm sure they realize by the millions of emails they're probably getting and angry tweets telling them to, get fisted or whatever the heck. They know that the PlayStation 5 is way too hard to get.
Well, that was certainly a weird humble brag segment.
So I think that this is their attempt to start making a smaller, cheaper revision. That way they can produce them just a little bit faster. Now, part of the anger about this, I think, comes from Austin Evans himself. This guy's done a bunch of big viral content talking about Microsoft and how much he just thinks it's the best system ever and stuff like that. You can see this is one of his videos looking at the Xbox Series X that has 16 million views. The guy is very heavily an Xbox content creator.
He's not a Xbox-centric channel. I don't think he really cares that much about it, but even if he does say something good about the Xbox, he's also said some good stuff about the PlayStation. He just wanted to make sure that all of these things were up to scrutiny, so that way he has fair and accurate readings. And he never had to talk about the Xbox in the video because he was only focusing on the old PlayStation 5 and the new one. The PlayStation fanboys, when they have no argument, whataboutism shows its ugly head. If it's not about how good Sony is, then it must be Microsoft's fault.
Nothing wrong with that. We all have our favorite systems, but I think a lot of people are kind of assuming malice.
Unironically, you're one of those people.
So a lot of people are thinking that his video was just overly negative because one of the conclusions he came to is that this new PlayStation 5 does in fact run hotter. Only by a couple degrees, but there is a discernible difference between the old PlayStation 5 that came out last year versus this new PlayStation 5 that's being released now. There is an actual measurable distance between these two different systems.
Well, then good thing we got those readings then, because I was getting a little scared that maybe my favorite plastic box wasn't going to live up to expectation.
It's tiny, but it does exist.
That's what she said.
But the key conclusion that Austin tried to draw in this video is the fact that it's pretty apparent that this new PlayStation 5 is pushing out more heat. But here's the gigantic thing that's making me just lose my mind. People are apparently saying that this hotter heat somehow is going to cause the PlayStation 5 to melt or break or sometimes just become faulty faster.
Yeah, and do you know where we can look at an example of that? From the previous generation before this one, when it came to the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 consoles. Both had overheating problems. The PlayStation 3 fail rate wasn't nearly as high as the Xbox 360, but they both had their own issues, the yellow light of death and also the red ring of death for the Xbox 360. I could bring up numbers, but you know what? I only exist here to laugh at you. That's what I've come to the conclusion of. It doesn't really matter how many articles I link at this point. I mean, if you really want to do that research, you can. I mean, it's right there. It's openly available. But also, you should know this. You have all of the consoles, remember? You're Dreamcast guy. You're supposed to be, like, the gamer trademark.
Yes, I'm serious. There are millions of people on the internet claiming that the PS5 is going to catch fire or something.
Well, the problem here, Dreamcast guy, is that he didn't say that. He said that it might cause problems with the internals and also reduce the longevity of the console. I know, it's weird. It's almost like you didn't watch the video.
So I took a look at some experts. This is actually an article over here on VentureBeat. This is a Jeff Grubb write-up. Now, you got to admit, this is a very, very funny image of a nuclear bomb PlayStation 5. But here's what he said. The new PlayStation 5 model is not actually worse.
Imagine my shock that we have to look at experts, aka Jeff Grubb, who's not really an expert on this, and he's going to explain to us everything that he missed in that Austin Evans video. It's almost like he's trying to catch himself in 64K, and there's nothing we can do about it.
So he goes through this and essentially talks about the fact that even though this is 300 grams lighter, which here in America, that basically means it's a half pound lighter, basically what's happening is that this is not actually worse. Based on this smaller heatsink, Evans and others have come to the conclusion that the new PlayStation 5 model is worse than the original. But that's actually a squishy statement that doesn't really line up with how we buy and use a gaming console.
Actually, it is. If we didn't buy Xbox 360s when they first came out, then no one would have ever known about the weird red ring of death. And then everyone would have kept buying them. And then we wanted to know what was happening with the internals, and that report came out. So how was this any different? Oh, that's right, because it's about Sony, and we need to defend them at all costs.
Jeff Grubb goes on here in his article to state that, I suppose you can claim that the latest PlayStation 5 model is worse if you're purchasing it as some sort of weird silicone cooling toy, but most people are probably purchasing it to play games, and both the original and revised hardware play the same games with the same performance.
That's weird. It's almost like Austin Evans didn't say that they couldn't run any of the same games. All he said was that the internals are downgraded. If you're going through this many leaps in logic and this many hoops to defend Sony because maybe they might have messed up on the internals, I don't know what else to tell you. It's not about, well, they can't play the same games, so it's not worse. He didn't say that it was worse because of that. He said it was worse because of the heat. The heat is going to mess up your console. This isn't even really about like trying to figure out internals and being super smart about all of this stuff when it comes to technology, but this is simply about watching the video. And I can tell that Dreamcast Guy didn't watch this video because I watched it, and pretty much most of the people besides PlayStation Fanboys watched it. All they want is someone that they can yell at, but something sinister happens a little bit after this, and it's not entirely Dreamcast Guy's fault, but we'll talk about it here in a little bit.
That's what's kind of essential here, is that this new PlayStation 5, it's not going to make your house actually get heated. It's not putting off so much heat that it's a danger or a threat. It doesn't seem like the system itself is having any sort of major cooling issues, a la the era of the Red Ring of Death, which originally was caused by the Xbox overheating. It seems like this is just a singular 1, 2, or 3 degrees. Like right here it says the difference is 3 to 4 degrees Celsius.
Well, I'll have you know that I actually hit up one of my own sources of information, an actual engineer who says liquid metal is corrosive to aluminum, so by doing this, the lifespan of the new PS5s is severely diminished and makes them more susceptible to dying. This is true, and that's all that was being said in that video. But instead, we have to flip this as, oh well, it's not actually worse, it's just doing the same thing, but it's only putting out 1 or 2 more degrees heat. This is pathetic.
Now, I think it's interesting that people are trying to pretend that this is just such a gigantic problem. Like, people are just across the internet right now, the amount of people trying to have this conversation point that, oh my god, this PlayStation 5 is going to melt. Oh my, there's so many PlayStation 5s just bursting into flames. That's not happening. And on top of that, PlayStation 5s are still just exceedingly rare. Let's just boil this down to brass taxes here. Even if you want to claim this is something actually going on, even if this new PlayStation 5 is just 1% worse, I think most people would be thrilled to find a PlayStation 5 at all right now.
That's great, Sweaty. He's not saying that you can't be excited about getting PlayStation 5. He's making you a more informed consumer. If you're going to buy a PS5, I'd like to know which one's the good one, which one's the bad one. But you don't seem to care. As long as it gets into the hands of people, you want big corporation to feel nice and safe, that people are just going to buy it up without any question. Just do it. No matter what. Just keep buying console. That's where you are. You're there right now.
I mean, this is still the rarest console on the planet. People are still just lining up. People are still freaking out. People still have Twitter notifications to try and hopefully find a PlayStation 5. Do you think there's anybody that's going to walk into Walmart and see that it has a slightly different barcode number on it and go, oh my god, this is the bad PS5. I can't get the bad PS5.
Well, an informed consumer would probably want to know what model it is. I mean, if they're like me, or I would hope you, but if they're like me and they want to get the absolute best, I wouldn't want to get one of the new revisions. I would want to make sure it's the old one. But again, you just want people to buy a PS5 for just any reason whatsoever, because I guess it makes big boy Sony feel all nice and good on the inside, and you can give them a little pat on the back.
That's not happening. This is people that are just trying to get the PlayStation 5 itself. Now, the last person I wanted to look at was actually MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer. This guy has actually programmed PlayStation 5 games. He's made Xbox games. He's made a lot of different Nintendo Switch games. This guy absolutely loves to try and test stuff out thoroughly for himself. And here he basically said, I've thought about covering the PlayStation 5 revision in a video, but I don't believe there's anything worth discussing. Whoops, I'm making a video about this at 2 a.m. Sorry about that, MVG. He says this, hotter is subjective when you're taking readings from the exhaust. When I measured my launched PlayStation 5 last year, I drew 140.9 Fahrenheit when I was playing games at load. So basically what he's saying is that these systems, like the amount of heat they're off-putting is not the same amount as what's actually going on inside the system itself.
Hey, Dreamcast guy, I know that you might not know this, but I know that the people that are watching this video will know this. Do you know that if you play a game like Cuphead, your computer or whatever you're playing it on will not run as hot? But if you start playing something like Middle-earth: Shadow of War, then you might have a little bit of a toasty system happening. That's what this kind of boils down to. So I guess, sure, it can be subjective, but they also were playing, that little robot thing game. I don't know what it's called.
Even if a system is actually pushing off a lot of heat, the odds of it melting, catching fire, or just instantaneously breaking is so incredibly low.
Then I think you need to look at the numbers for the fail rate of the Xbox 360 and the PS3 yellow lights, because you'll be surprised it was pretty common.
You have to be playing this thing in a sweaty warehouse with 100-degree temperature for 10 hours a day for these systems to actually break.
And I'm sure you would know all about that in your house where you have your PlayStation 5, right?
They are made to cool. If you ever actually open up a PlayStation 5, a huge chunk of it is one gigantic cooling core. If you think that 3 or 4 degrees of Celsius is going to instantly make this thing become exploded like the 4th of July, buddy, that ain't how physics works.
Actually, it kind of is. And also, he didn't say that it would explode or catch on fire. He said that your system will just die quicker. It's because it's trying to cool the innards. It's trying to make sure that your APUs and your CPUs and your GPUs aren't just, damaging that quickly. And even if it's not pushing out the most heat, it still may not be doing the job. Now, in all fairness, Sony could have just said, well, this is within the acceptable rate that we can have temperatures on the inside be, and they thought that this was acceptable. But to everyone else that wants a long-lasting console, this may not be the answer.
Going back to that Jeff Grubb article, I feel like he really wraps things up very nicely with essentially a talk about what this really boils down to, which is just a minor revision. Back in the day, whenever you were getting the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 3, you always had these tiny touches, these updates to the system itself. A slim model, an ultra slim, one that doesn't have disc trays, but instead the system itself just opens up. Now, each of these versions of it basically were the same specs, it was the same processing power, it's the exact same console. It just has some tiny tweaks on the technology side that makes it where Sony or Microsoft or whoever can make these things a little bit easier on their end.
If you ever want to timestamp this and send it to someone, this is what I'm going to have you timestamp, is right here. The TLDR of this entire video is, don't worry, big boy Sony, I'll take care of Austin Evans.
Anybody who's trying to act like the new PlayStation 5 is trash or that suddenly Sony is trying to sell you out, you guys are psychos.
Yeah, we're the insane ones. We're the insane people for wanting to make sure that this console doesn't die on you the second that you get it, that it doesn't overheat and mess up the internals and then you have to do a warranty return. We're the crazy ones. But not the PlayStation fanboys that doxed Austin Evans because he might have said something that hurt their feelings, even though he has the research in front of him, and he didn't say that this was definitive by any stretch. He didn't deserve to get doxed, not by you and your ilk. They don't have any respect for Austin Evans, and I don't have any respect for you.
This is a tiny, normal, standard revision. Do you know how much money Microsoft lost dealing with the Red Ring of Death?
And you know what? We can criticize Microsoft for that too. In fact, they got criticized. The 360 with the Red Ring of Death was one of the worst things, and it's something that they deserve to pay for. And they had to do it all out of pocket. So they needed to get criticized, the same way that Sony can get criticized for this.
Literally $1 billion. Literally $1 billion was lost dealing with console returns with the Xbox 360. That's what they dealt with. Nobody wants to repeat that. Sony can't afford to lose $1 billion of PlayStation 5s right now. I guarantee that they tested this thing thoroughly before they started just throwing them onto boxes and putting them into trucks to mail out to fans themselves.
Do you happen to know that the PS3s that got the yellow light of death were actually the revised ones? The original ones that had backwards compatibility that first launched, those were fine. But the one, like the one that I had, it yellow lighted. So yeah, I don't know if they thoroughly tested anything.
If this system does start failing, if it does start having crashing and heating issues, I mean, Sony's going to get cooked way more than any PlayStation 5 games are going to. But these are just some random off-the-cuff aggravated thoughts, because this kind of stuff, I get so annoyed when there's like a tiny piece of well-edited misinformation that spreads and spreads and spreads.
You mean like your video? This video specifically? Where is the misinformation in Austin Evans' video? I'm not seeing it. In fact, I don't think that you found it. And you know what? I would dare to challenge anyone that thinks that Austin Evans was making all this stuff up, saying that it's going to catch on fire or whatever you said. I suggest that they go watch his video, which is what I'm going to link in the description, as well as this stupid video. And I'll also link a good friend of mine, Fratanga, who has a video coming out really soon, if not already out by the time that I put this up. But you can watch his video, which is far more comedic than mine, with perfect timing. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button with that little bell thing so you get the notification of when I go live here on the main channel, because I'm going to start doing a lot more streaming. I know things are in a state of disarray here, but then also in case a new video comes out, probably in the next 2 months, because who knows when I'm actually going to upload. But also do the same for Fratanga, because he's a good friend of the channel as well. And even Griffin Gaming, because he's the one that I actually saw this from initially in the first place. But at least now I have a little shout-out segment. So thank you to a longtime supporter, Aisha Fan, Dimitri, Mazrika, and Raymond Ortega, and even Rents Rants, for your wonderful contributions to the Patreon, and also to Hey I'm Turtle and Pokemon Red, and every other YouTube member. We're gonna keep using all that stuff. And also, I just wanted to thank all of you for sticking around. If you've been here or if you're new here, make sure that you feel nice and comfortable at home, because we got some more people to laugh at in the near future, so take care.